This narrative that DJ is some monolith is kind of funny to me, mostly because just on a cursory glance at his career, it doesn't seem to be true. DJ Uiagalelei has been in the sights of college football for a long time. A highly touted high school recruit who was penciled in to be the next of a list of quarterbacks at Clemson turned superstars. And after a standout game his freshman season against a great Notre Dame defense, it seemed all but a certainty that that would be his legacy. But things didn't play out that way. He struggled in his first season with an abysmal 108 quarterback rating, and in his second year at the helm, despite improvement, he was already getting heat to be replaced by the next highly touted quarterback. He then left and had a strangely quiet but efficient season at Oregon State. Every year as a starter, his quarterback rating has been on the rise, and last year he finished in the 71st percentile as a passer. To me, I see a guy who's clearly improving over time, just looking at those numbers. But that argument is kind of easy to brush away. You could claim that his improvement at Clemson isn't important because he went from abysmal to mediocre. You could also argue that it's not impressive to move out of the Pac-12 and put up big numbers. I mean, Bo Nix and Michael Penix both did it around the same time frame as well. Maybe it was just easier to put numbers up out there. So that's the narrative I want to address in these next few videos. Is DJ some static player who's reached his ceiling? Or should we be taking the improvements he made last season seriously? In my mind, I have to consider three things before I can make that conclusion. 1. Did Oregon State's offense artificially pump up his numbers using their scheme? 2. Did the level of competition or surrounding talent impact those numbers? And 3. Can we see anything in his film that justifies the jump? Let's start with scheme. I thought it'd be interesting to give my unsubstantiated perceptions first, and then go back to see if those are justified by the stats. So to me, DJ is strong-armed but struggles at times with accuracy issues. Part of those issues come from a long windup that I think can get out of sync with his base, and part of just often a byproduct of a younger player with plus arm strength. He's mobile, but not necessarily because he's going to win any races, but because he moves well enough to challenge any defender who chooses to take on his 230-ish pounds in space. This size also allows him to have good pocket presence as he can see over the line and take a hit or two while releasing the ball. I also think his footwork can struggle a bit as he can kind of enter statue mode and his feet look a bit like they're in concrete. So knowing this, how would you build your offense to suit him? To stereotype the offense he first took a hold of, I typically think of Clemson as having a very prototypical spread offense. 11 personnel, meaning one tight end and one running back, often no huddle with lots of screens and RPOs. I have this concept of them running mostly inside zone and read options off of that, and then sprinkling in some shorter West Coast passing concepts. Oregon State, on the other hand, feels a bit more Shanahan-esque. More under center or pistol sets with reduced splits from the receivers, which allow them to block down and get the edge on outside zone runs. This run-first offense then opens up the play-action boot game, which gives receivers time to get downfield and keeps the quarterback from sitting motionless in the pocket. On almost all fronts, I would assume Oregon State would fit DJ better. It would get him moving and comfortable off play action and allow him to show off his biggest asset, his arm strength, more often. It also seems to be a run-first system, which takes a bit of the pressure off of him to carry the offense. But do the numbers really bear this out? Well, firstly, I was wrong about Oregon State being more of a run-first offense. In fact, while DJ was behind center at Clemson, they were fairly similar in their run-pass split. So we can throw that schematic difference out the window immediately. Next, I wanted to see if targeting different routes over the course of the seasons could explain some of the differences. Different quarterbacks do better jobs targeting different routes. Here's a chart of all the routes that PFF tracks and how well DJ did at targeting them in terms of passer rating over his career. We'll be coming back to this as a reference. So now that I know what he tends to do best, we can see if his improved passer rating came from a more friendly passing distribution. I wanted to focus on the biggest differences between the two programs in these 3 years. Okay, so these really surprised me. The routes that Oregon State targeted more often than Clemson were crossing routes and hitches. Normally, this would be good, since crossing routes tend to be pretty efficient throws nationally, but they really haven't been for DJ. Hitches, on the other hand, have been pretty good for him, but they're not really moving the needle much, sitting barely above his average. At Clemson, on the other hand, he threw way more go routes and screens to the wide receivers and tight ends, both routes that he tended to fare relatively well with over his career. This is all kind of surprising. This past season under Garrett Riley, they went away from any form of deep ball, but it seems like at the time, Dabo recognized that go routes let his arm talent show out, and they exploited it pretty heavily, targeting them about 22% of the time. So, there seems to be no advantage in terms of run-pass ratio, and maybe even a negative correlation between better passing rating and targeted route concepts between Clemson and Oregon State. But what about general pass distribution? Did he push the ball downfield more at Oregon State, despite lagging in go routes specifically? Well, the answer is yes. Oregon State did throw more intermediate passes than Clemson. That means passes that traveled between 10 to 20 yards in the air. And DJ has shown over his career to have a higher passer rating the more he pushes the ball downfield, although this is admittedly a pretty small effect, potentially being canceled out from the previous thing that I mentioned. Okay, another point I brought up is play action. It's widely accepted that play action plays bolster passing rating as a whole, and DJ is no exception to that, having a rating boost of 13 points on play action plays versus non-play action over his career. Oregon State was one of the top teams in the country in play action rate to boot, running them about 20% more often than Clemson, which looks like a small improvement on this graph, but could add up throughout the course of a season. And lastly, he went under center more. Again, for whatever reason, quarterback rating tends to go up for all quarterbacks on under center snaps, and Oregon State leaned on this. In his career as a whole, he's a significantly more efficient passer under center with a huge jump of over 30 passer rating points. However, at Clemson, he took virtually no snaps under center. This creates a ton of noise and a problem for any claim we want to make. If his only under center snaps came at Oregon State, it's entirely possible that he improved in a specific way that helped him under center, but we couldn't know that because we have no reference from his time at Clemson. All right, that was a lot of data and probably got a bit overwhelming, but let's summarize what the numbers tell us. 1. Routes targeted probably played a minimal role in improving his passer rating, as we have conflicting data on that with him targeting more efficient routes at Clemson, but more efficient parts of the field at Oregon State. And he leaned heavier on play action and under center throws, both of which tend to help anyone's passer rating in his time at Oregon State. The question that remains then is, how much did these schematic differences impact his noted jump in efficiency? Well, to answer that question, I wanted to take away as much noise as possible while keeping the sample sizes relatively big. So I thought it would be helpful to eliminate the under center passes and see where he finished with only shotgun passes included. You can see that in his original jump of 10 points is now reduced to 5, and he fell from around 67th to the 60th percentile of passers. All of this is to say, I think based off the data, you can claim that at least some, and probably a decent chunk of the improvement from DJ's last season came because the scheme at Oregon State was pretty quarterback friendly. Now what we still have to account for is surrounding talent, which is something I plan on diving into next video. And we still shouldn't ignore the improvement that he made, because if it's something that helped DJ to succeed last year, it might be something that Norvell can incorporate into his offense this year, and I hope we dive into that the video after that. But for now, I'll leave you with this. DJ is a guy that jumped across the country and picked up and ran a scheme about as well as anyone in the country last season. And while Oregon State's offense is quarterback friendly, I showed in a video earlier this offseason that Norvell's is too, and hopefully with the talent and coaching in Tallahassee, we'll see him take another step forward this fall. Thanks for watching. I hope to dive a bit more into film in the next video, but I wanted to try to spend some time justifying my thoughts with stats that may or may not have validated my original opinions. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and if you want to see more of stuff like this, subscribe here and follow me over to Knowles247 for more content. Thanks.